close your eyes for a second. I want you to picture someone who is just drowning in student loan debt right now.
Right.
Try to visualize their life. Like, what do you see?
Most people probably see the exact same thing.
Exactly. If you're like, the vast majority of the population, you are almost certainly picturing a 22-year-old.
Yeah, for sure.
You see someone who just freshly graduated,
Yeah.
right? Maybe they're eating instant ramen in some tiny, way overpriced first apartment.
Stressing over that entry-level salary.
Right. Trying to figure out how to, navigate adult finances for the very first time. You picture youth. You picture the beginning of a career.
It's a very specific, deeply ingrained cultural image.
Totally.
And it's a powerful stereotype. I mean, it's comforting in a strange way because it frames the debt as this temporary, youthful hurdle.
Yeah, like a rite of passage.
Right, a rite of passage that you eventually just outgrow.
Well, prepare to have your mind completely blown.
Yeah, it really is wild.
Because the massive stack of 2025 financial data we are looking at today proves that stereotype is a complete illusion.
Completely false.
The real unflinching face of the heaviest student debt in America is not a 22-year-old eating ramen.
Not even close.
The demographic carrying the absolute heaviest burden is likely thinking about hip replacements, AARP memberships, and retirement accounts.
The raw demographic breakdowns we're analyzing today fundamentally rewrite the entire narrative.
They really do.
When we synthesize the thousands of data points regarding, who holds this debt, the picture that emerges is not just slightly different from what the culture assumes.
No.
It is, mathematically speaking, the exact opposite.
Welcome to the Generational Wealth Project. I'm so thrilled to have you with us for this deep dive.
It's going to be a good one.
Our mission today is to cut through the absolute noise of the modern financial world, to push past the sensational headlines, and to deliver the ultimate aha moments that actually change how you view your money and the economy around you.
Yeah, we really want to pull back the curtain here.
We are looking at a huge stack of recent 2025 financial data, statistics, demographic breakdowns, and economic reports.
A lot of spreadsheets.
So many spreadsheets. But we aren't going to get bogged down in naming specific publications or authors or political talking points.
Right, none of that.
We are keeping this laser focused purely on the raw numbers, the mechanics of how this debt functions, and the story the data tells.
And the data tells a story of systemic, multi-generational financial trapping.
Yeah.
We're going to explore the mechanics of how an entire population has essentially been anchored by a financial product that behaves completely differently than almost any other type of consumer debt.
It's wild.
Yeah.
But before we dive in and reveal the massive twists hidden in these numbers, I want to quickly remind you, the listener, to like and subscribe to the Generational Wealth Project.
Please do.
Hitting that subscribe button ensures that you never miss out on these insights. I mean, we do the heavy lifting, we read the dense financial reports, we parse the spreadsheets, so you can just hit play and get a masterclass in the realities of our economy.
We do the boring stuff so you don't have to.
Exactly. So please, take a second right now to like and subscribe.
Awesome.
Okay, let's start by establishing the absolute baseline. Before we can talk about the surprising demographics of who is holding all this debt, I want to understand the sheer volume of the problem.
Right.
What are the macro level numbers we are dealing with right now?
So to understand the scope, we really have to look at the total aggregate figures before we slice the data into specific groups.
Okay.
Right now, in the United States, there are 42.5 million Americans currently holding federal student loan debt.
Wow. I want to pause right there to visualize that figure.
Yeah.
Because 42.5 million can just wash over you as another big number.
It's a massive.
That is essentially the entire population of California, plus a few million extra people thrown in for good measure.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like if every person with student debt formed their own country, it would be one of the largest countries in Europe. That is a massive structural slice of the citizenry.
It is an enormous footprint. And the total national burden, like the cumulative weight of all those individual balances added together, currently sits at a staggering $1.6 trillion.
1.6 trillion.
Yeah, trillion with a T.
Again, I mean, human brains are not wired to comprehend trillions. We lose the scale.
We really do.
A million seconds is about 11.5 days. A billion seconds is roughly 31.5 years. A trillion seconds is over 31,000 years.
That really puts it in perspective.
So a $1.6 trillion block of capital is an economy-altering mass. It represents money that is tied up in servicing past educational expenses rather than moving freely through the current economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The scale of that 1.6 trillion is precisely why we have to examine how it's distributed.
Right.
And this brings us to the first major mathematical illusion in the data, an illusion that distorts how almost everyone understands the student loan crisis.
Let's get into it.
When you read conventional news reports or listen to broad financial commentary, you will constantly hear that the average student loan debt is almost $39,000.
Right. I've seen that number everywhere.
To be highly specific, based on the federal borrower data in front of us, the exact average is $37,853.
Almost 38,000. So if I'm listening to this and I look at my own balance, and let's say I owe $22,000, I might hear that 38,000 average and feel a sigh of relief.
Sure.
I might think, well, I'm doing much better than the typical person. I'm way below average.
That reaction is incredibly common, but it relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of the statistics.
How so?
Relying solely on the average or the mean, in statistical terms, is really dangerous in data sets with extreme outliers.
Okay.
Because while the average is nearly 39,000, the data reveals that the median borrower owes significantly less.
Wait, the median?
Yes. The median balance actually sits between $20,000 and $24,999.
Oh, wow. I want to unpack this difference thoroughly because it completely changes the psychological landscape of the listener's relationship with their own money.
It really does.
Break down the critical difference between the average and the median in this specific financial context.
Yeah.
Like, why is there a massive, nearly $15,000 gap between those two terms?
It really comes down to the mechanics of calculation.
Right.
The average, the mean, is calculated by taking the entire total pool of debt, that massive 1.6 trillion, and dividing it equally by the total number of borrowers, the 42.5 million people.
Right, just straight division.
Exactly. It spreads the total pain out equally on a piece of paper, regardless of who actually holds what.
Okay. And the median?
The median, on the other hand, is the exact middle point of the human experience in this data set. If you lined up all 42.5 million borrowers in a single row, starting on the left with the person who owes $1 single and ending on the right with the person who owes $1 million.
Okay, I'm picturing the line.
The median is the balance of the person standing right in the middle of that line. Half the people in the country owe less than them, and half the people owe more.
So if the median is right around 20 to 25,000, that means over 21 million Americans owe less than 25,000.
Yes.
Which makes that 38,000 average seem almost totally detached from what a typical person is actually experiencing.
Completely detached.
If half the country owes less than 25 grand, how is the average being yanked all the way up to 38,000?
It is being pulled up by a severe mathematical skew in the data.
A skew.
Yeah. The distribution is not a gentle bell curve. The data shows that a very specific, relatively small group of borrowers is exerting a massive gravitational pull on the entire national average.
Who is this group?
Specifically, we're looking at about 8.4% of all borrowers.
Okay.
These are individuals who hold graduate or professional degrees, doctors, lawyers, specialized master's degree holders.
Ah, I see.
This small fraction of the borrowing population frequently owes well over $100,000 each. Some owe multiples of that.
Let me bring in an analogy here, because this is the classic dive bar scenario of statistical distortion.
Oh, I love this one.
Right. So imagine you are sitting in a local working-class neighborhood dive bar. There are 9 other regular folks sitting at the bar with you.
Okay.
Let's say the average net worth of the 10 people in that room is about $50,000. Everyone is doing okay, just regular people living regular lives.
Sure.
Then the doors open and a billionaire walks in. Let's say Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk sits down and orders a beer.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Suddenly, mathematically, the average net worth of the 11 people in that room is somewhere around $10 billion.
And the math checks out. But the lived reality of the people in the room does not.
Exactly. If a reporter walks into that bar and says, oh, the average net worth in this room is $10 billion, everyone here must be doing fantastic.
They'd lash him out of the building.
Right. The 10 original people are going to look at the reporter like they've lost their minds.
Yeah.
Their bank accounts haven't changed.
Yeah.
The reality hasn't changed.
No.
The billionaire simply skewed the mathematical average. And that is exactly what is happening. with its 8.4% of graduate and professional degree holders.
Precisely.
They are the financial billionaires walking into the student loan dive bar, carrying massive six-figure debts and dragging the average up to $38,000.
It perfectly illustrates why understanding the median is so crucial for any borrower trying to contextualize their financial standing.
Right.
If you owe $24,000, you shouldn't feel like you're doing, better than average. You are actually the exact definition of typical. You are the median.
Wow.
And conversely, if you owe $38,000, you might read a headline and feel like you are just an average, middle-of-the-pack borrower.
Yeah, you think you're normal.
Right. In reality, you owe significantly more than the vast majority of people holding student loans.
It distorts the psychological relationship we have with our own debt.
Completely. It creates a false sense of security for some and an amplified sense of isolation for others.
That psychological aspect, I mean, it just cannot be overstated. We constantly judge our own life choices against the benchmarks we see in the media.
Exactly.
But the benchmark headline is distorted by an extreme minority.
Yep.
Now, having established that baseline, we understand the 42.5 million people, we understand the 1.6 trillion, and we understand the illusion of the average. We have to pivot to the absolute core revelation of this entire data set.
This is the big one.
We are going to completely shatter that 22-year-old ramen eater stereotype we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive.
This is where the data becomes truly shocking.
Let's hear it.
When you take this 1.6 trillion and you slice it not by degree type but by age bracket, the resulting picture defies almost all conventional logic about how debt is supposed to function over a human lifespan.
Okay, let's walk through the life stages meticulously. The sources break this down beautifully. Let's start with the youth, the borrowers under the age of 25.
Right.
These are the recent grads, the people trying to secure their first real apartments. What do they owe?
Borrowers under the age of 25 owe an average of about $14,000.
$14,000.
Yeah.
That is remarkably low
Sure.
compared to the apocalyptic narrative we constantly hear about youth debt.
It really is.
Okay, let's move a decade down the road. What about borrowers aged 25 to 34? These are people who've been in the workforce for a while. Maybe they've bought a car, maybe they're looking at getting married or buying a starter home.
For the 25 to 34 age bracket, the average debt jumps up to about $33,150.
Okay, that jump makes intuitive sense. More people in that 25 to 34 bracket have gone back and finished their master's degrees, or perhaps their undergraduate loans have just been sitting around accruing some interest while they establish their careers.
Exactly.
But here is the absolute jaw-dropper. This is the statistic that forced me to put the report down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
I know exactly which one you're talking about.
The demographic that holds the absolute highest average federal student loan debt. It is not the 20-somethings. It is not even the 30-somethings.
No.
It is borrowers aged 50 to 61.
The data is unequivocal. Borrowers between the ages of 50 and 61 carry an average federal student loan debt of $46,556.
Unbelievable.
I think it's important to emphasize that figure, $46,556. That is more than triple what the under 25 crowd owes.
I am still struggling to wrap my head around this. We're talking about people who are in the twilight of their primary earning years.
Yep.
These are people who are getting AARP mailers. People who are supposed to be aggressively pivoting their cash flow toward retirement, maximizing their 401k catch-up contributions, trying to pay off the final years of a mortgage so they can live securely on a fixed income.
And instead...
They are carrying nearly $47,000 in student loan debt.
The inversion of the expected financial life cycle is profound.
It's crazy.
And it does not stop at age 61.
Wait, really?
The data shows that borrowers over the age of 62 people who are actively reaching the traditional retirement age, who may already be transitioning to fixed incomes like Social Security, they carry an average balance of over $43,000.
Wow.
When you step back and look at the total pool of 42.5 million borrowers, over half of them are 35 years old or older.
So 50 is literally the new 22 in debt years.
Basically, yes.
The highest burden is falling on the people who have the fewest working years left to pay it off. I need you to explain the mechanical reality of this. How does this mathematically happen?
It's complex, but...
Because if someone graduated at 22 and they're now 55, That means they have been interacting with this debt for over 30 years. How does a loan taken out during the Clinton administration balloon into $47,000 3 decades later?
To understand this, we have to look at the brutal mechanics of compounding interest over prolonged periods, intersected with the reality of economic cycles.
Okay, lay it out.
It's essential to understand that these loans did not just sit stagnant in a vacuum. A loan taken out in 1995 didn't freeze in time.
Right.
Many of these older borrowers started with original principal balances that were much, much lower than what they owe today.
So what happened?
Well, human lives are messy. Over a 30-year span, people face job losses, medical emergencies, divorces, and macroeconomic recessions.
Life happens.
Exactly. And when those life events happen, borrowers historically utilize tools offered by the servicers, specifically deferment or forbearance.
Let me stop you right there, because those two words, deferment and forbearance, they are marketed as relief, right?
They certainly are.
They sound like a life raft thrown to a drowning person. The messaging is, oh, you lost your job. You had a medical emergency. Don't worry, we'll put a temporary pause on your monthly payments so you can get back on your feet.
That's the pitch.
But mathematically, are they actually life rafts?
They are more accurately described as financial quicksand.
Quicksand, wow.
Yeah. During many periods of forbearance or deferment, depending on the specific type of federal loan you hold, you are indeed allowed to pause your monthly payments without going into default.
Okay, so you don't default. That's good.
However, the interest on that loan continues to accrue every single day.
So the meter is still running.
The meter is still running. And worse, the critical mechanism is what happens when that period of hardship ends.
What happens?
That accrued interest often capitalizes.
Capitalization. If there is a villain in this data set, it is that word.
It truly is.
Break down exactly what capitalization means for the listener who isn't a financial mechanic.
Capitalization is the mechanism of disaster for long-term consumer debt. In simple terms, capitalization means that your unpaid interest is taken and permanently added to your principal balance.
Wait, added to the principal?
Yes. So let's run a hypothetical. Let's say you owed $20,000 on an undergraduate loan.
Okay.
You lose your job during the 2008 financial crisis. You apply for a hardship forbearance, which is granted.
Makes sense.
Over the next few years of struggling to find work, $3,000 of interest builds up in the background.
Just sitting there.
When you finally get a job and exit forbearance, your new principal balance is no longer $20,000. That $3,000 of interest capitalizes. Your new principal is $23,000.
And the really insidious part is what happens next, right?
Precisely the issue. Going forward, your new monthly interest charges are calculated on that larger $23,000 base, not your original $20,000.
Wow.
You are now paying interest on your past interest. The interest begins generating its own interest.
That's horrifying.
Over 20 or 30 years as a borrower navigates the dot-com bust, the 2008 recession, the pandemic utilizing forbearance multiple times, this capitalization cycle acts as a multiplier.
Right.
It turns a manageable initial loan into a monstrous burden.
I want to give the listener a visual for this, and I want to avoid the cliche of just saying it's a snowball rolling down a hill.
Yeah, that doesn't quite capture it.
Because a snowball just gets bigger as it picks up snow.
Yeah.
This is more insidious. Think of it like a financial Russian nesting doll, but in reverse.
I like that.
You open the doll, and the doll inside is actually bigger than the one you just opened. You start with a small loan, the innermost doll. You hit a financial hardship, and the servicer wraps a layer of paused interest around it.
Yep.
That's a bigger doll.
Yeah.
A few years later, another hardship, another layer of capitalized interest wraps around that one.
Exactly.
By the time you are 55 years old, you are carrying this massive, heavy outer shell of a doll that is mostly made of capitalized interest, and buried deep inside it is a tiny original $10,000 loan you took out in 1994.
The nesting doll analogy captures the structural layering perfectly. Time is the ultimate multiplier in this system.
Yeah.
The architecture of the debt instrument guarantees that if you cannot pay continuously, without interruption, for decades, the product will mutate into something exponentially larger.
Which raises a massive question. When we look at an entire generation approaching their 60s with nearly $50,000 in student debt, I mean, is this a failure of individual financial planning?
That's the debate, isn't it?
Are millions of 55-year-olds just bad at budgeting? Or is this a fundamental design flaw in how these loans accrue interest during times of inevitable human hardship?
The data strongly points away from individual failing and towards structural design flaws.
I would agree with that.
If it were a localized issue like a few thousand people scattered around the country making poor budgeting choices, you could argue for individual failure. But we are talking about statistical majorities across massive demographic blocks. When an entire system is designed so that a temporary pause in payments during a recession results in a permanent, compounding penalization that outlasts a borrower's working years,
That's broken.
the architecture itself must be interrogated. The compounding nature of the interest creates an inescapable trap for those who experience even standard temporary financial instability over a 30-year timeline.
It's staggering. We are essentially penalizing people for living normal, messy human lives over a 3-decade span.
Exactly.
But, as our sources point out, it's not just the old undergrad loans from 1995 that are layered in those Russian nesting dolls, right?
No, not at all.
The 50 to 61 demographic isn't just suffering from old compounding interest. They are actively taking on new debt later in life.
That is a critical distinction. The compounding interest on old undergraduate loans is only one half of the equation for the 50-plus demographic.
Okay, what's the other half?
We also have to look at the infusion of massive new principal balances taken out in middle age. And one of the largest, most destructive drivers of this is the Parent PLUS loan program.
Parent PLUS. This is where the emotional psychology of money really collides head-on with brutal financial reality.
It's devastating for a lot of families.
Explain how a Parent PLUS loan functions differently than a standard loan for an 18-year-old.
Parent PLUS loans are unique, and for many families, they create a devastating collision. These loans allow parents of dependent undergraduate students to borrow money directly from the federal government to pay for their child's education.
Okay.
They can borrow up to the total cost of attendance minus any other financial aid the student has already received.
So they just cover the gap.
Right. But what is absolutely crucial to understand here is the underwriting process, or rather, the lack thereof.
Wait, what do you mean lack of underwriting? When I go to get a mortgage, the bank analyzes every penny I make, every debt I owe, and calculates my debt-to-income ratio to make sure I can actually afford the monthly payment.
Yes.
They don't do that for Parent PLUS.
No, they do not perform a standard debt-to-income analysis.
You're kidding.
Not at all. Unlike loans taken out by an 18-year-old student, which have strict, relatively low federal borrowing caps per year, Parent PLUS loans essentially have no cap.
No cap.
As long as the school says the cost of attendance is $60,000 a year, the parent can borrow $60,000 a year.
Wow.
The credit check involved is primarily looking for adverse credit history like recent bankruptcies or current defaults, not a comprehensive analysis of whether the parent actually has the income to repay a 6-figure loan over the next 10 years.
I want you listening to really absorb that. A 50-year-old parent, desperate to get their kid into a good school, can sign a digital form and suddenly take on $30,000, $40,000, or even $50,000 of new high-interest debt per year.
For 4 years straight?
For 4 years straight, without anyone verifying if their salary can actually support the repayment.
Precisely. And because of those uncapped borrowing limits, combined with interest rates that are historically higher than standard undergraduate loans, Parent PLUS balances can rapidly balloon into massive 6-figure liabilities.
Insane.
The demographic data indicates that older borrowers are heavily burdened by these specific loans.
Think about the generational instinct at play here. As a parent, your deepest biological and cultural instinct is to secure a better future for your child.
Of course.
From the time they are born, we are told that higher education is the golden ticket, the absolute prerequisite for a stable middle-class life.
It's the American dream narrative.
Right. So a parent in their late 40s or early 50s looks at the staggering cost of tuition in 2025, looks at their 18-year-old child's aspirations and says, I will do whatever it takes to give you this opportunity.
Yeah, they sign the papers without a second thought.
It is an act of profound love. But mathematically, they are inadvertently detonating their own financial stability right on the precipice of their retirement.
That's exactly what's happening.
They are trading their future security to fund their child's launch into adulthood.
It is one of the most profoundly tragic ironies within the modern financial system. The mechanism designed to facilitate generational advancement is, in many cases, ensuring generational impoverishment.
Wow. Generational impoverishment.
The parent enters their 60s saddled with a $120,000 debt they cannot possibly repay on a fixed Social Security income.
No way.
And the ultimate irony is that by destroying their own retirement security to fund the degree, they may eventually become a massive financial burden on the very child whose education they financed.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the backside of that cycle. So the kid gets the degree, they start their career, maybe they even pay off their own modest undergraduate loans.
Right.
But 15 years later, they have to financially support their 75-year-old parents because the parents' Social Security checks are being garnished by the federal government to pay for a parent PLUS loan.
It happens more often than you'd think.
That is a truly dark, inescapable economic loop.
It really is.
But parent PLUS isn't the only driver of massive debt in middle age. The data points to another major factor, which is the mid-career pivot.
Yes.
Let's talk about the graduate debt engine.
The data shows that older borrowers are also accumulating massive balances by returning to school mid-career for advanced certifications, master's degrees, or professional degrees.
Okay.
And the statistics surrounding graduate school debt are perhaps the most disproportionate and startling in the entire study.
The ultimate balance killer, as our source material explicitly calls it.
Balance killer is a highly accurate descriptor. Here is the critical statistic from the federal data.
Let's hear it.
Graduate students make up just 17% of all enrolled students in higher education.
17%.
However, they account for almost half of all federal student loans issued each year.
Wait, I'm struggling to understand how that is mathematically possible. 17% of the student body is taking nearly 50% of the loan volume.
That is what the data says.
That is an insane concentration of debt. How is the government approving that much disproportionate risk for such a small slice of the population?
It ties back directly to the same mechanical flaw we discussed with parent PLUS loans, the lack of strict federal borrowing limits.
Of course.
For an undergraduate degree, there are hard caps on what you can borrow from the government. But for graduate students, they can borrow via the Grad PLUS program up to the full total cost of attendance for their program.
Though no caps again?
None. Whether that program is a $40,000 master's in education or a $250,000 law degree, the federal government will finance the entire amount.
Which means the schools can charge whatever they want.
Exactly. This allows universities to charge practically whatever they want for graduate programs because they know the federal loan system will provide the student with the capital to pay the bill, regardless of the student's future earning potential.
I have to play devil's advocate here, or maybe just push back on the entire cultural narrative we've all been fed since kindergarten.
Go for it.
We are always told that higher education is the ultimate investment in yourself. You know, the more you learn, the more you earn.
Right, that's the slogan.
If you hit a ceiling in your career at age 40, the standard advice is to go back and get your MBA or specialized master's to make yourself more competitive, to break through that ceiling.
Yep.
But if these graduate degrees are acting as literal balance killers, at what point does the math completely invert? Are we essentially taking out mortgages on our brains with absolutely no house to show for it?
A mortgage on your brain with no physical house to show for it. That is a grim but highly accurate way to conceptualize the financial reality for many of these borrowers.
It's terrifying.
To answer your question, the math of the investment inverts when the debt-to-income ratio of the new credential exceeds the borrower's capacity to pay the principal down within the remaining working years.
Okay, walk me through a hypothetical so we can see that inversion. Let's make it concrete.
Sure. Let's compare two borrowers. Borrower A is 25 years old. They take out $80,000 in graduate loans for a degree that immediately boosts their salary by $40,000 a year.
Great.
They have 40 working years ahead of them to leverage that higher salary to pay down the debt and accumulate wealth.
Right.
For borrower A, the math works. The return on investment is positive.
They have the runway.
Exactly. Now look at borrower B. They are 48 years old. They hit a career ceiling.
Okay.
They take on that exact same $80,000 debt for a master's degree, hoping for a promotion. But borrower B only has perhaps 15 or 17 prime earning years left before retirement.
Oh, I see the problem.
The timeline for a return on investment is drastically compressed while the compounding interest engine runs just as fast.
Yeah.
The cultural pressure to credentialize mid-career is locking people in their 40s and 50s into an inescapable math problem. They simply do not have enough runway left in their careers to out-earn the cost of the uncapped debt they took on.
It's exactly like taking out a 30-year mortgage when you're 55, but there's no physical asset to sell if you get in trouble.
That's a perfect comparison.
You can't foreclose on a master's degree. You can't hand it back to the bank and wipe the slate clean. You just owe the money and the interest on the money until you die.
It's a permanent liability.
Okay, we have looked at the age brackets, we have looked at the terrifying mechanics of capitalization, and we've looked at the uncapped loan vehicles like Parent PLUS and Grad PLUS.
We've covered a lot.
But now we have to look at the chasm. The deep dive shifts here because this burden is not distributed equally across society.
No, it is not.
When you look at the demographic breakdown, the data shows how systemic inequalities absolutely compound within the student loan ecosystem.
This is one of the most critical sections of the data we reviewed.
Let's get into it.
When we move beyond age and degree type and analyze the debt by race and gender, the disparities are stark and deeply troubling.
What are the top-line findings?
The top-line finding is that Black borrowers owe almost 50% more than white borrowers, on average.
50%.
Yes. Furthermore, women owe significantly more than men.
50% more. I mean, that's not a marginal difference. That is not a rounding error. That is an entirely different financial reality.
It's a completely different trajectory.
And the source material points out that these initial gaps at graduation turn into absolute chasms as the years go by.
Yes, chasms.
I want to meticulously break down the mechanics of this compounding inequity. Because it's not just that marginalized groups are borrowing a little bit more up front, right? The real damage is about what happens after they walk across the graduation stage.
Correct. The initial borrowing difference is only the starting line. The true structural divergence happens in the decades following graduation.
Okay.
What we are observing here is the intersection of debt mechanics and broader socioeconomic realities, specifically the well-documented wage gap. If a Black borrower or a female borrower enters the workforce and is systematically paid less than their white male counterpart for the exact same work, the mathematical consequences for their student loans are severe and immediate.
Because less take-home pay means less disposable income.
Exactly.
I want to trace that out for the listener because the term negative amortization is thrown around in these reports, and it is a term that makes people's eyes glaze over.
It's jargon, for sure.
But it is the key to understanding this chasm. Let's create two hypothetical borrowers to explain this.
Sounds good.
Imagine person A and person B. They graduate on the exact same day with the exact same degree and the exact same debt balance. Let's say $50,000 at a 7% interest rate.
Okay, starting from the same spot.
Person A gets a job paying $75,000. Person B, facing systemic wage gaps based on race or gender, gets a job paying $55,000. What happens next? Break down the math of negative amortization for person B.
Let's trace their paths. Both of their $50,000 loans are generating roughly $290 in interest every single month.
Okay.
Person A, with the $75,000 salary, has enough disposable income to afford the standard 10-year repayment plan. They might pay $600 a month.
Got it.
$290 covers the interest, and the remaining $310 knocks down the principal balance. Every month, their balance shrinks.
As it should.
Now, Person B, struggling with a $55,000 salary in the same economy, cannot afford a $600 monthly payment.
Right. Their rent is the same, groceries are the same.
Exactly. So, to avoid defaulting, they are forced to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, an IDR.
And IDRs are often praised as lifesavers, but mathematically they can be a trap.
They really can. They cap your monthly payment at a percentage of your discretionary income. For person B, that lower salary means a very low IDR payment.
Okay.
The formula might dictate that person B only has to pay $100 a month.
Okay, so person B pays their $100 every month. They are a good citizen. They are doing exactly what the servicer and the government told them to do.
Yes.
What happens to their balance?
This is negative amortization.
Here we go.
Person B pays $100. But the loan generated $290 in interest that month.
Oh, no.
The $100 payment is instantly swallowed by the interest, leaving $190 of unpaid interest for that month.
And that just sits there.
That $190 doesn't just vanish. It is added to the total ledger.
Wow.
Person B made a payment perfectly on time, but their total debt went up by $190.
It went up.
Month after month, year after year, they make payments, but the balance never drops. In fact, it grows.
It's a treadmill that keeps speeding up while you're running on it.
That is exactly what it feels like.
Person A is paying down the principal and getting free. Person B is trapped in negative amortization, paying a monthly subscription fee just to watch their debt grow.
And as the years stretch into decades, Person A's balance approaches zero, while Person B's balance spirals upward into those $60,000, $70,000 figures we see in the older demographic brackets.
It's heartbreak.
The systemic wage gap acts as a direct accelerant for the compounding debt trap.
And there's another agonizing layer to this that the data points out.
Yes.
We just talked about the balance-killing nature of graduate school debt. Well, the data shows that female professionals and Black professionals are enrolling in graduate school at significantly higher rates.
They are.
I'm looking at this and thinking, why? Why take on more debt? And the answer is likely to overcome the very workplace bias and wage stagnation we just talked about. They are trying to credential their way past the discrimination.
It is a logical, albeit financially devastating individual strategy to combat a systemic issue.
Right.
If you face a glass ceiling in your corporate environment, or if your bachelor's degree is statistically undervalued in the market compared to your peers, obtaining a master's or a doctorate seems like the rational path to force equity.
It makes total sense on paper.
You return to school to demand higher compensation and undeniable qualifications.
But the tragic irony, and I really want you listening to sit with this for a second, the exact populations trying to use higher education as an equalizer, as the great leveler of the American playing field, are being intensely penalized by the financing of that education.
Yes.
They go to grad school to beat the wage gap, and in doing so, they lock themselves into the uncapped, high-interest graduate debt engine that guarantees their net worth will remain suppressed for decades.
It creates a self-reinforcing cycle of wealth extraction.
Wealth extraction.
The pursuit of equity generates a disproportionate debt burden, which in turn widens the wealth gap it was intended to close. The systemic design extracts wealth from the very populations trying to build it.
It forces us to reflect on this not just as an individual budgeting issue, but as a profound structural issue.
Absolutely.
It redefines what equal opportunity actually costs over a lifetime. Access to education is one thing. The financing of that access is creating entirely new, permanent underclasses.
It's a structural barrier.
Okay, we need to transition. We've looked at the oldest borrowers, we've looked at the demographics and the grad students.
Right.
Now we need to look at the massive center of the bell curve. If compounding interest is the engine trapping 50-year-olds, and systemic wage gaps accelerate that engine for marginalized groups, we have to look at the largest pool of people currently caught in the gears.
Middle-age squeeze.
Exactly. We need to explore the middle-age squeeze and the macro shift in our economy over the last 30 years.
This brings us to the largest total pool of debt by volume. When we look at the 35 to 49 age bracket, they hold the highest total cumulative debt of any group.
How much?
It sits at an astonishing $646.6 billion.
Nearly $650 billion held by people between 35 and 49, the classic sandwich generation.
Yes, and right behind them, trying to catch up, are the 14.7 million borrowers aged 25 to 34, who hold an average of about $33,150 each.
Let's focus on that sandwich generation for a minute, the 35 to 49-year-olds holding almost $650 billion.
Okay.
If you are in this age bracket listening right now, you know exactly what this feels like. The financial pressure on this demographic is immense and multifaceted.
This is the period of life traditionally associated with wealth accumulation and household formation.
Right.
However, this specific cohort is attempting to manage mortgage payments or struggling with historically high rent prices while simultaneously facing peak childcare costs.
Daycare alone is like a second mortgage.
They are paying for daycare, school expenses, extracurriculars. They are managing intense career demands. And on top of all of that, they are still trying to chip away at loans they took out 15, 20, or even 25 years ago.
Wow.
The $44,288 average debt per borrower in this specific age range represents a massive diversion of capital away from savings, investments, or local economic consumption.
They are squeezed from every possible side. They are taking care of aging parents, they are taking care of young kids, and they are paying off an undergraduate degree they earned in 2005.
It's a relentless squeeze.
I compare the modern student loan to a phantom roommate.
A phantom roommate. Elaborate on that.
Imagine a roommate who moves into your apartment when you're 22 years old. They take up space in your budget. They demand a 10% to 15% cut of your paycheck every single month on the 15th.
Okay.
But they don't buy groceries, they don't clean the bathroom, they don't contribute to the household in any way.
Terrible roommate.
And the worst part is they refuse to move out until you are in your 50s. That is what this debt functions as, is a permanent shadow liability that diminishes your purchasing power for 3 decades.
That is a very apt analogy.
And the historical context provided in our sources proves that this phantom roommate is a relatively new phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
This is not how our parents or grandparents experienced adulthood.
The historical timeline is arguably the most important macroeconomic data point in this entire analysis.
Let's look at the timeline.
The landscape has fundamentally shifted in a very short period of time. Student loan debt has more than doubled just since 2008.
Doubled.
It has grown faster than any other type of household debt, with the singular exception of mortgages.
Doubled since 2008, the year of the great financial crisis. But let's look further back, because the sources highlight the 30-year shift from 1992 to 2022.
In 1992, the share of households carrying student debt was 10%, just 1 in 10 households.
Okay, 10%.
By 2022, that number had doubled to 21%. And if you look specifically at households headed by someone ages 25 to 39, the prime household forming years, that percentage jumps to 41%.
I want to spend significant time on this because it explains the tension everyone feels in the modern economy. Let's compare the balance sheet of a typical 30-year-old in 1992 versus 2022.
Let's do it.
In 1992, a 30-year-old might have a car loan, some credit card debt, and if they were lucky, a mortgage on a starter home.
Standard stuff.
The cost of college was something you could feasibly pay off in 5 or 10 years if you lived frugally and worked a summer job.
Right.
Now, contrast that with the balance sheet of a 30-year-old today. For 41% of them, before they even think about a mortgage, a car, or a child, they are carrying a 5-figure liability.
Yeah.
They're starting their adult lives $40,000 in the hole. Why did this happen? Why did tuition skyrocket so violently between 1992 and 2022?
The explosion in cost is a multi-layered economic failure. First, over the last few decades, state legislatures systematically reduced their direct funding for public universities.
Okay.
Historically, the state subsidized higher education heavily, treating it as a public good. When they pulled that funding, the cost burden shifted directly onto the student.
Okay, but if the cost shifted to the student, shouldn't market forces have kicked in?
What do you mean?
Shouldn't students have said, I can't afford this, forcing universities to keep prices low?
That is exactly what would have happened in a normal market. But the higher education market is not normal.
Right.
To help students pay these newly elevated costs, the federal government opened the floodgates on student loans. They essentially signaled to the market, we will finance whatever the school charges.
Oh. And the universities realized they had a blank check.
Precisely. If a university knows that the federal government will provide an 18-year-old with a loan to cover whatever price tag they set, there is absolutely zero market pressure to keep prices down.
Wow.
Universities began competing on amenities, luxury dorms, rock climbing walls, massive administrative bloat, and simply raised tuition year after year knowing the federal loan system would clear the transaction.
So the system backfired.
The loan program, which was originally designed to make college accessible, became the exact mechanism that allowed it to become unaffordable.
So we took a generation of young people and used them as pass-through entities to transfer trillions of dollars from the federal government to university endowments and administrative payrolls.
That's one way to look at it, yes.
And the young people are left holding the bag in the form of a non-dischargeable debt. Let's talk about the macroeconomic drag of that. What does the broader American economy lose when 41% of young households are carrying this phantom roommate?
It loses a lot.
When the 35 to 49 demographic has $646 billion trapped in student debt.
The economy loses the engine of its future growth.
Explain that.
The American economy is largely driven by consumer spending and household formation. When a 35-year-old is paying $600 a month to a loan servicer, that is $600 not going into a local restaurant.
Right.
It is capital not going into a down payment on a house, which slows down the construction industry and real estate market. It is money not going into starting a small business.
It just vanishes from the local economy.
It is money not going into a 529 plan for their own children, ensuring the cycle repeats. We are essentially siphoning capital out of local communities and household balance sheets and funneling it back to the federal government or Wall Street securitization trusts.
And the data backs up that this drain is permanent for many. What is that chilling statistic about the long-term payoff rates?
The data reveals that 42% of students who borrow money for college are still actively paying off their loans 20 years later.
42%,
Nearly half.
20 years later.
Yes.
That completely destroys the idea of a quick payoff. The traditional financial advice model, just eat beans and rice for 2 years, work a side hustle, and be debt-free, simply doesn't apply to the mathematical reality of a $50,000 principal balance at 7% interest for someone making a median wage while paying 2025 rent prices.
It's a structural impossibility for most.
Which leads me to this macro question. Looking at how this debt has grown faster than anything except real estate since 2008, has education officially transitioned in this country from a public good to a luxury asset?
If we look at the behavioral economics of the system, the data certainly points in that direction.
How so?
A public good is accessible, relatively affordable, and broadly benefits society without severely indebting the individual user. Think of public high schools or the interstate highway system.
Right.
A luxury asset is something highly priced, financed over long periods, that supposedly confers elite status or premium returns.
Okay.
When 41% of young households are essentially carrying a shadow mortgage just for the baseline privilege of entering the professional workforce, and when nearly half of them are forced to carry that shadow mortgage for 20-plus years, the system has effectively priced higher education as a luxury, debt-financed asset rather than a foundational public good.
It's a profound shift. We've securitized human potential. We took the innate human desire to learn, the desire to better oneself and contribute to society, and we turned it into a $1.6 trillion financial product that extracts wealth from the middle class until they literally retire.
And as we established at the beginning of our deep dive, the extraction continues into retirement for an increasingly large segment of the population.
Yeah.
The 50 to 61 demographic holding the highest average debt, nearly $47,000, is the ultimate undeniable proof of that transition.
The debt outlasts the career it was supposed to enable.
Exactly.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today on the Generational Wealth Project. This deep dive has fundamentally shifted how I look at the economy, and I hope it has done the same for you listening.
That's a lot to process.
Let's concisely summarize what the 2025 data has proven today. The numbers show unequivocally that the cultural stereotype of student debt being a young person's problem is a myth.
A total myth.
It is a multi-generational crisis that actually peaks when borrowers are in their 50s and early 60s. We've learned that the $38,000 average we hear about in the news is a mathematical illusion, pulled up by a small group of high-balance graduate students, while the median borrower owes in the low 20s.
We also established the dangerous mechanics of capitalization.
A Russian nesting dolls.
The financial Russian nesting dolls that turn temporary hardships into permanent financial anchors. We explored how the burden is heavily driven by uncapped loan vehicles like grad PLUS and parent PLUS loans, which trap older borrowers.
Yeah.
And most critically, we detailed how this debt disproportionately impacts marginalized groups, with Black borrowers and women facing compounded debt spirals due to systemic wage disparities and negative amortization.
Exactly. It's an engine of inequity disguised as an engine of opportunity. And it has reshaped the macroeconomy, essentially acting as a shadow mortgage on 41% of young households, fundamentally altering their ability to build actual wealth, buy homes, or participate fully in the economy.
It changes everything.
If you found this deep dive valuable, if it gave you that aha moment that changes how you view the financial systems operating around you, please, right now, take 1 second to like and subscribe to the Generational Wealth Project.
It really helps.
Your support allows us to keep analyzing the data, ignoring the noise, and bringing these essential financial insights directly to you.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. I want you to mull this over on your drive home or while you're making dinner tonight. We started this conversation by talking about the stereotype of the 22-year-old eating ramen, stressing about their first loan payment.
Right.
But the data showed us the reality. The heaviest burden is carried by people in their 50s and 60s. So I leave you with this question.
What's the question?
If a massive and growing percentage of the American population is entering their 60s, is still carrying $43,000 in student loan debt, while simultaneously expected by society to stop working and retire, What does the very concept of retirement look like for the next generation?
That's the billion-dollar question.
When your useful investment in education becomes the exact financial anchor that prevents you from resting in your old age, will student debt permanently redefine what it means to grow old in America?
Something to really think about.
Thank you for joining us on the Generational Wealth Project. We'll see you next time.